in progress.
Well, good evening. I'm going to begin our session this evening. My name is Sarah Bingaman, and I am one of the co-leaders of Indivisible Rural Illinois. And Marcy is also here with us. She is the other co-leader of this group, but we also should give credit to Terry, who helps us out very often with this group. And I think I need to begin this evening by recognizing that this is a very solemn day as we remember how close we came to losing our democracy 1 year ago exactly. And I know that many of you probably participated either virtually or in person in events today commemorating January 6th. And so tonight, as we gather to talk about confronting extremism in rural Illinois, there really is no better example of the outcome of ignoring or failing to document extremism than the January 6th attack. The people who took part in the attack came from every corner of the United States. They came from our neighborhoods. Many were current or former military or law enforcement. It's only through our vigilance and action and putting the spotlight on those who believe in violent action that we can hope to move forward. So that said, this is the Indivisible Rural Illinois group. We meet the first Thursday of the month. So here we land on January 6th. We probably would not have planned to be here on January 6th, but here we are from 7:30 to 9. We formed immediately following the 2020 election when we saw how badly progressive candidates were shellacked in rural counties throughout Illinois. And so we are determined to be better organized, better trained, more unified, and more supportive of each other as we head into this 2022 election. And we thank you, each and every one of you, for joining that effort to make sure that we are better prepared. I'm very excited to tell you that we do know who our February speaker will be. His name is Richard Martin. He lives in Iowa, and he has done a very in-depth research project into the voting habits of many voters, particularly 10 states, including Illinois. And so he is going to have some amazing information to share with you. He has written a report called Factory Towns. And I will just tell you that when I got that report, I read every word of it, and I've read it a couple more times since. So I think you will really enjoy hearing a very different perspective on what makes up rural communities than we usually think of, and particularly rural voters. So I don't want to take any more time because we don't want to pull away from our wonderful speaker tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair. Marcy, will you please introduce our speaker?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Anyway, hi, everybody. My name's Marcy, and I am from Champaign, Illinois. And as Sarah said, both of us co-chair the Indivisible Rural Illinois group. And tonight we have a lot of interesting talk for you. A few months ago, some of you may have been here on the Indivisible Rural Illinois call when Benjamin Beaupre spoke. Actually, Benjamin Beaupre is here, of his research on the history of the KKK in Central Illinois. In rural areas, we may not hear the moniker KKK, but the right-wing extremism is still alive and well. Heather McMeekan is here, and she is a civil rights activist in Macomb, Illinois, which is home of Western Illinois University. She's a founding member of the Racial Justice Coalition of West Central Illinois, a grassroots collective organizing against structural racism, hate, and racism in over a dozen counties in Illinois. Members of the Racial Justice Coalition will join us with reports of extremism they are witnessing, confronting, documenting, and enduring in their counties. and they'll share some helpful wisdom for us. They're going to give us some calls to action. They have been targeted and threatened for their activism, and specifically Heather, and she's going to discuss the trauma-informed strategies for organizing for civil rights while enduring cyberstalking, libel, slander, intimidation, and other disrupting and silencing tactics. So please welcome Heather McMeekan. Heather.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting us to, this night is a night that marks a tragedy in our nation's history that should never have happened, could have been prevented, was not responded to. And all the pieces that allowed that to happen are things that are present in every one of our communities that we've been fighting for quite a while. And so I'm going to begin with a content warning here. The information that I'm going to cover, that our team is going to cover tonight, and the links linked from the document that they have posted contain images, evidence, direct witness accounts, videos, screenshots, and a lot of those are very disturbing. They're likely to be traumatizing. They definitely will trigger historical and interpersonal racial trauma. And we hope that you view them with caution, take breaks, and take good self-care as much as you're able to. And please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us in the Racial Justice Coalition if you have any concerns. And we'll go forward. I'm going to read kind of an opening piece from our graphic designer, Mimi B, who grew up in rural McDonough County, and she is a biracial queer woman. And I'm just going to read her statement here. So one of the things that we do as white allies is we give voice to marginalized Black folks and other people of color, members of the LGBTQ community. I will say that myself, I am a non-binary pan person. My pronouns are she and they, and it's an honor to read this to you. As Black people and people of color, we are no stranger to the pain, trauma, and alienation that comes with being marginalized in this country. And my heart especially goes out to those of us living in rural America. We have lived and continue to live in a time where raising awareness for the racial injustice we face has been an uphill battle. And in a time where getting awareness and justice is difficult, even in densely populated areas, there's often very little room for those of us in rural areas. Living in rural Illinois as a visibly Black biracial woman has only plastered an extra layer of hopelessness and isolation to the racial trauma I endure. I've seen people joke about rural areas, especially southern ones, under the impression that they're just cesspools of racist white people and shouldn't exist. That's partially true in that white people tend to be the majority in those areas, but the thing is, we exist in rural areas too. We exist in the counties that are hours away from the rest of civilization, in the small towns with names that most have never heard of, overrun by conservative, racist white people, and every facet of the place we should be able to pridefully call home. Home should always be a safe and accepting space, and here it is not. If we dare express our pain aloud and say this is wrong, not only are we intimidated or abused by those in positions of power, but we are also silenced, gaslit, and shamed by the community that surrounds us. The corruption, hate, and extremism runs so deep, and often it gets swept under the rug because we don't have hundreds of people to rally for us. Rarely do we have organizations to advocate for us or unbiased press to pressure accountability into the picture. As a collective, we are so alone, and we need more people to step up and fight this fight. Yes, there is risk in being one of the first to speak out in such an unaccepting community. But if there's anything I've learned from being a part of the Racial Justice Coalition, it's that there is strength in numbers. The Racial Justice Coalition started out with very few people, but it's grown exponentially since then and has built a solid foundation towards what will hopefully lead to a better community for Black people and people of color. Once you take the first step, others will feel safer to speak their truth and join the cause. That extra layer of hopelessness and isolation will slowly peel away as we begin to feel heard, seen, and supported. As frightening as it may seem, I hope to see more people in rural communities band together to do the right thing. It's a never-ending journey, as the journey for racial justice in general, but it is a possible journey from Macomb to Chicago to America to the entire world. We will continue to persist, persevere, and fight against the status quo. Thank you for being my voice today, and thank you for being her witness. Thank you, Mimi, as always. And Mimi does amazing graphic design work, making multicultural coloring pages. If you ever need an artist, let me know and I will happily put you in touch with her. So I'm going to switch out a bit here to screen share to our slide deck. Let's see, where is it? I did it before. 1 second. Let's try. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So this picture is from, I want to say 2020 in the early spring. It might be 2019 now I think about it. I'm pretty sure it was early spring of 2020. And that is an event over the river in Iowa that we traveled to in support of some of our Democratic women over there who were protesting a white nationalist preaching in a church. A white Christian nationalist in particular. What's especially tragic about that is that most of the people in that church presumably are good-hearted people, right, who didn't even understand that they had been invited to hear a white Christian nationalist speaker. So they protested, and I just came along to lend my support, and we need a lot more of that, that's for sure. I'm going to tell you just a quick bit about myself as an organizer. I do hold my master's in community health ed, so I'm a preventionist at heart. I'm a former paramedic and EMS instructor, and so I'm used to dealing with police. I'm used to going into dangerous environments and having to triage and calm it down and de-escalate. And not that that's fun, but wow, was that good training for doing this work, especially in this time. I also grew up in a very far right Christian conservative household led by a man very much like Trump, so much so that my friends say, you know, I can't stand listening to the president, the former president now, thankfully, because he reminds me so much of your dad. That's interesting, isn't it? But because of that, I have and I'm not a conservative. I am absolutely a progressive, far left, progressive, intersectional, try to be liberal. And you know, having to come to that over the years and having to decide what I stand for, those things are not easy. And we all have to make that journey and we all have to decide where our line is. And so, you know, whatever your line is, you will know why it's important to take on the work. So why is that not turning? There we go. So I'm not going to read this definition of extremism, but I will just let you know, you can look it up online and we have it in our documents somewhere. But in particular, it's important to talk about the type of extremism that presents risk and danger, right? Risk, danger, harm, and disparate impact. So abolitionist organizing is not presenting risk, talking about when they say that they want to dismantle the police, right? But that narrative is really much more complex than that, because nobody ever talks about just doing away with it all at once and then not replacing it with other systems of justice that hopefully are not carceral systems and don't have disparate impact and certainly are not designed to be white supremacists. But the type of extremism that we in particular will be going over tonight will be some of the different manifestations of it in our communities. So I am a Democratic Precinct Committee person for Macomb City 1 in Macomb. Macomb is the county seat. It is the home of Western Illinois University. And this is me at a parade, I want to say in 2016, 2017, something like that. And at the time, I actually am a kite festival organizer, but that would be what I would prefer to be organizing, quite honest, if only that were possible. I had organized and run a couple kite festivals here, but the last one, I had two of the Black student orgs that I was the advisor for were volunteering at, and they were so mistreated by the parents that it was an unsafe environment for them and the children. And so I canceled and I stopped organizing kite festivals in my community because I will not organize something that I can't make as safe as possible, and definitely for children. But the other thing that's happened is because I started standing up for racial justice, and we did in our org, certainly, a lot of people got so mad, and now I'm being stalked so constantly. I can't even be in public with my friends or family without someone taking a picture and it risking showing up on this hate site that's operating in our community. And I'll get to that. But I knew that's what I was in for, because I'm also well advised. And at some point, I and several other precinct committee people wanted our party. We have no source of power here. Let's be clear. We live in a community that has been red since the beginning. And it's also quite patriarchal. It does not have a very functional government. It has a patronage system where, as long as you're willing to speak positive and go in and have one-on-one meetings, then you might be lucky enough to have things work out for you. That is not vibrant, transparent, responsive democracy. And we wanted to start building something better. So I hung up my kite pole and flags and decided to start getting to work in my own community on racial justice. And so about in 2008, I want to say maybe around there, what I was seeing online, I'm a career webmaster now. I have almost, I forget, like 20 years in or something like that, working on the web. And during that time, I watched the web. You should know this about the web. It really, all the good things of the web come about through very, I would say, problematic cultural problems, right? People want to do gaming faster, and that's great. That's not a problem, except that now they design games to be addictive, and they do not make sure that they are safe for Black folks and other people of color, for gay folks, for women, and men too. So those things are really problematic. But also the web is driven by people wanting faster download speeds for porn, commerce, media. And so that's where the money is, and it's reflected in that. And the money is not in being responsible. It's not in providing a safe space. It's not in curating any type of environment. And, you kind of buy into that when you agree to use social media or hop on any of these platforms. But we were seeing things online. I was seeing things that were keeping me up at night. And I got quoted in a book that we can't sell in my community called, by being on Twitter, and it's called Digital Civil War: Confronting the Right-Wing Menace. Our bookseller can't put that in their window for fear of it getting busted out or shot out. And they would lose business if they put that in. So, and it was simply for putting a quote on Twitter that was a very innocuous quote. But at the time that the author grabbed it, Peter Dow, he had said, I was having a conversation with some people that were, I would say, good Christians. They were women, they were crunchy parents. And I was watching them get pulled into a conversation, further and further extremist, to where they were starting to agree that a loving God would be okay with locking up babies in cages and closed borders, and just things that I'll also tell you, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. And so I consider justice part of my faith. Promoting democracy, standing up for the marginalized. That's all just part of who I am. And so I don't have to, and none of you ever have to justify having concerns for others. So we formed a liberal lunch group and just started, let's have a brown bag and let's just start talking about these things once a week. And we started attracting more and more people, more diverse people would come to it. And when they knew that it was a space where, even though we were really white, when they knew that we were actually talking about real things, the word spread, and they started coming in and bringing us their issues. And we discovered, oh my goodness, well, we can do something about that with our white privilege in this community. Because sending in a gray-haired white lady to talk about somebody who's treating someone wrong, who's maybe an international student, that has a lot more impact than that international student themselves confronting that, right? And I will tell you that right from the start, when we realized the way things were going, our leadership team is comprised of amazing human beings. And we were right off the bat built from the ground up to confront racism, white supremacy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, largely because that is what our people have suffered. That is what our loved ones suffer in this community. And then I pulled them together in 2018. I said, you know, I'm going to reach out. I think I'm going to form a formal org because we need more help than we can get. And at that time, I was in several local orgs that have a liberal label. And I tried to get them to take on the concerns that I had, both as a precinct committee person and as a person of faith. And that just wasn't the direction that they wanted to go, which is fine. And this is what I would tell anyone: if you don't find an org that recognizes your energy and passion for this work, don't be afraid to form your own, because you can do a lot of good with just a small group of people. And if you study civil rights movements, they always began with a small, persistent, dedicated group who was just not going to give up until they kept on, talking it out, kept on putting in people's faces, and they built movements that way. And it doesn't take a movement to do a lot of good. It would be helpful, but we are way too outnumbered here in these rural red communities, and even more so since they jettisoned so many liberals from Western Illinois University on purpose, and we will get to that. But our leadership team are also almost all, with the exception of just a few, victims of these cops in our community. They're the ex-wives of them, survivors of domestic abuse. They're the daughters of abusive cops. They're the nieces, aunts, uncles. So we know that there are problems here. So when Black folks told us what they were experiencing, which is an order of magnitude way worse than what we were, we did believe them right off the bat. I would say, I don't know if everybody would say that, but we could see that was at work in our lives and in our community for a very long time. And I put in complaints against police officers since I was a paramedic. And so I have a lot of them who hate me. I've been that whistleblower that turned in someone if they were doing something that I felt was unsafe or harmful as a paramedic. And over time, you cost a few people their jobs, and they don't tell their family, well, that Heather McMeekan caught me driving the ambulance drunk and I got fired. They say that horrible Heather McMeekan made up stuff about me and now I'm fired and it ruined my life, and their whole family hates you, right? Well, you do the right thing, and I can't rebut the lies out there about some of that work because I did it on behalf of very vulnerable people, right? So if you're going to take on the work, you don't always have to be the person out front. I am one of those people that's out front. I'm comfortable being that person. I won't say it's easy. I won't say it's fun, but I will say that there was a tremendous amount of joy and satisfaction knowing that you helped somebody get some healing that they weren't going to get in some other way. Now, the thing is, our people have been targeted mercilessly online and now in the community. And a lot of our members have lost their churches. They were kicked out of their preschool teacher duties. They were told they weren't fit to be Girl Scout leaders. They were kicked off of boards of liberal organizations and told they weren't welcome anymore. And we actually have had people write letters to the editor about how we should not use and write us angry emails saying we don't have the right to use the words Democratic women, and tried to make us disavow that from our org. But we are a vibrant charter of the Illinois Democratic Women, and very proud to be that. And I'm very grateful for their support. There's an element of extremism that we want to call out that's been at play in our county now since the earliest that we've tracked it has been 2018. And it's called the Constitutional Sheriff's Movement. And you should know what that means is that they really believe that they are the full representation of a loving God's law of the land, and that they can just ignore any laws they want. They're behind Second Amendment sanctuary counties, when basically what that means is any new legislation that gets passed for gun control or protecting people from gun violence, they're just not going to enforce it. So when we say police officers selectively enforce things against Black folks and other people of color disparately, it's right here. And we certainly, our sheriff is this. We have several officers who are this. They passed that we are a gun sanctuary county. So no matter what else we manage to get passed, they're just not going to enforce it here, right? Except that's very problematic. That won't hold up in court, but who's going to sue? Please look that up, and you do want to start checking and seeing if that person is in your community, because something you should know about and why this represents a present threat. We do a lot of parallels to history. And after Hitler was defeated the first time, they thought they were done with him. And what he did was he went underground. He found some of the most brutal people he could find. He sent them into communities and provided them training on brutality. And he started finding disaffected youth and men who would be willing to be brutal and encourage them to just hit their teachers, attack librarians, attack community leaders who spoke out. And what that would do is it primed those communities so that when they sent the brutalist, the brutal person in there to do an act of horrific brutality, everybody else had already been conditioned to just look the other way and try to look out and hope for the best for themselves and their loved ones. And so a takeover doesn't have to be an army marching into your community. It doesn't have to be a Trump truck parade. It absolutely can be from good people just being too afraid to confront things while they're easier to confront. And this is the easy time to confront, to be sure. And it's getting harder and harder every month that goes by. And so that's one of the reasons why I have currently endless passion and energy for this work. And our team works extremely hard at this because we're at risk. What happens if Trump or someone like him gets into power again, and then they say, okay, constitutional sheriffs, we've received a threat against those poor Black folks. We're going to go put them in a safe place. Please help them get to the train station. Go call up your militia and help them get to the train station by 10. And if they can't get there, we're going to send our people around to go get there. Do you know which of your officers in your community would stand up against that? We do, we think. We also know officers who absolutely would go along with it, and those ones are ones that we want to hold accountable now. We want to get them on the public record. We want to get investigations and such. So that's what that's really about, tracking this stuff. The framework agreements that we operate under are pretty immutable, like nonviolence only. We do not escalate. There is not enough of us to pick fights, right? And so when we protest, we don't yell back. We're not incendiary. We're not confrontative. I think a lot of people would tell you that that's not true because they see just standing there with cardboard and the words Black Lives Matter. An FBI agent told me that was poking the bear. Why do they get to be a bear? I'm standing there with cardboard with words on it, and they've got a truck, right? So those are the things. So nonviolence only, we de-escalate because we also know as white allies that if they're going to target people, historically as white allies, it's rare. I mean, that happened to Heather Heyer, but to be clear, they were just targeting everybody under that, right? In Charlottesville. But generally white allies have a measure of safety historically, because the blowback to whatever org harms a white ally is such that it shuts down their hate movement. And that has been true many, many times. Now, it didn't always happen right away. But the other thing about having white privilege as a white ally, if I'm irresponsible and I stir up my community in a way that takes some rando with a gun and an axe to grind, they drive through our neighborhoods and look for a Black person who has to walk on the road because we don't have sidewalks in that part of the community, because that was the red line part of the community and there's just never been investment in it and they're at greater risk. That person gets harmed by that. That's the way that we expect that kind of stuff to go down. And to be clear, we have that stuff happening and have for a while. We also, it's amazing what, if you create an org and do it as an allyship first stance, you're going to be shocked by where that'll take you. But that told us that when people brought their concerns to us, if there was something we thought we might be able to do about it, then we were obligated to try. And we lost a lot of people over that allyship first stance because they're like, oh, but you're going to make my friend mad. Some of our Dem women have had to step down from our leadership and even leave our org because their spouses have abused them, or their families have abused them, or their children have said, you know what, you're that liberal, I won't go into the pejoratives, but you don't get to be around your grandkids now, right? It's a big ask, asking people to take on racial justice work in a majority white, very red community with very few orgs willing to stand with you. Now, not everybody has to be the tip of the spear, but you're going to need somebody who's passionate and willing to go out there and do it imperfectly. And, you know, I'm always getting criticized for being too this or too that, or not looking like this, or not using those words, or not having that degree. Literally, a local feminist org wrote a letter to the editor about who should be speaking about these issues, and it clearly was not me, right? But I kept waiting for people who'd be better at it than me, because I'm not the person that our Black folks need. They need safety from retaliation. They need witness and validation. And we can't fix anything until they are safe telling their own stories and getting justice for that. And that's what we're trying to do. And so I pulled together my friends in 2019 in my dining room here. And I said, I want to form this org. We're going to try to be live out loud, progressive, intersectional, you know, anti-racist feminists, as if we live on the coast of California and don't care about, you know, other people's opinions about it. And probably people will end up hating me before the end of this, and I may have to, you know, it may go horribly bad, but let's see how far we can get. And my friends were in, and they said they'd stick with me, and they have. And I could not do this work without them. The other thing I'll let you know is everything you're going to hear tonight is not unique. These are not things that we came up with. We absolutely stand on the shoulders of the giants of the civil rights movement. And that is literally every single Black person who has to advocate for themselves in every space. And we've learned so much from them. And I want to thank them for their willingness to give us their trust with their stories, that we might better understand the context around how things happen to them. Because as white people with white privilege, we have a lot of bias that we don't see around. And I've made every mistake in the book as an ally, just so you know. I've been a terrible ally. I've been that white feminist who didn't see any of it at all. And unfortunately, to my great shame, I did shut down discussions from Black folks at the time. I didn't realize what I was doing. And I'm so grateful that my friends checked me on that and have helped me start to do better. But I got a long way to go, to be clear. We don't fight the people, right? We try not to engage with trolls. There's just too many of them. We don't bother trying to change anyone's mind for anyone who's not with us. We focus on trying to fix structures, trying to hold people in power accountable, trying to illuminate how government's supposed to work, and then move on from there. And we do things in stealth as much as possible because of safety. I've learned that it's important, you know, as a white person, when we first started, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a problem. I'll just go ask and they'll fix it, right? And that works for us as white people. That doesn't work at all in racial justice, civil rights organizing. I'm just going to let you know. You'll get a lot of blowback for that. So you do have to cultivate within yourself a tolerance for discomfort, and what you choose to call a win. And for us, just showing up imperfectly, saying whatever we say, whether my voice shakes, whether I'm angry, whether I look like I'm whatever, I still tried my best. That alone is better than a lot of people do. And that needs to be called a win, because every time you get something on the public record, it's a win. Now, the other thing, we use a trauma-informed approach on everything. We banned the word sorry. We banned apologies from our leadership team in our meetings because that wastes way too much energy. The other thing that we banned is any discussion at all about white feelings. How are those white people going to feel about this? What are they going to do? Other than to talk about tactically, how are we going to handle blowback? Why? Because we white people are conditioned to make it always recenter ourselves in every space, and that just shut down every discussion. Once we started doing that, well, we lost a lot of older white members, but we gained a far more diverse, younger, progressive, intersectional movement that was far more representative, and all of a sudden, we had way more data to work from, and it was totally worth it, and I have no regrets other than not learning about it and doing it like maybe 30 years ago. Building orgs for resistance, we use the Backfire model, and I'll get into that a bit. But, you know, just always, we try to always remember, and oh my goodness, there is nothing that can prepare you for starting an org and then watching your marginalized community members be mistreated because of your mistakes. And that has happened repeatedly to Mimi. I have watched Mimi suffer for trying to stick up for herself, for our org, for our work. She has been targeted in ways that I can't even imagine. And she's a young person, right? Just at the beginning of her life and, going out there and trying to see what the world offers. And so we had to pull a lot of our Black folks from public and being able to speak in public, just because the blowback to them was so traumatizing and dangerous and harmed their friends and family in ways that don't even begin to do anything to us. So it's been a learning experience. So the Backfire Basics, and this is in that handout that we gave you, so I'm not going to go over all of it, but I will just tell you, civil rights organizing, at least the way that we do it, we've discovered it really is about not allowing us, our fellow white folks, to titer outrage, not allowing sub-narratives, not allowing dehumanization of victims, right? So the Backfire Basics are this: something happens, and this is about confronting injustice in all of its forms. You expose it, which means you get it on the record. You do a public comment, you write a letter to the editor, you make a post about it, you try to get a news story on it. You redeem them, you validate the target, you stand together. You don't let them just claim that that person deserved it or they did something that they shouldn't have or whatever. Injustice is injustice, and it does need to be opposed, and you have to oppose it a very specific way. You reframe it so that and you resist whatever their reframes are in power, because they want to just smooth it out. We all want our nice white peace because, and this is the truth, I could be a white person that wouldn't know any of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, and really believe that this community is fine. All of our cops are great. All of our leaders are ethical. Everybody gets along, and not know any of it. And that's the kind of life you can lead as a white person, because we have white privilege. We could just ignore it all. But when it's our people, we can't afford to do that. Then you mobilize support and you try to stand up to intimidation. Not easy things to do at all, but the model itself is tried and true. It does work. It just takes time to learn how. The other thing to get used to is that it is okay for us to speak in every space that we want to speak in. We may not be invited, bring a folding chair, right? Shirley Chisholm, if you don't have a seated table, bring a folding chair. And Mother Jones was a very traumatized woman, and she got tired of waiting for others to help her about the things that she cared about. So she decided to organize against children's labor. She's a great labor organizer, right? But she was not afraid of the pen, not afraid of the scaffold, meaning hard work, climbing up to where the power is to try to get those conversations, or the sword, right? And the sword means to stand up and do what's hard and fight for justice. And we don't mean that violently. We mean like the sword of Damocles, okay? So telling the truth, the facts as you understand them as best you can. So I was part of the Indivisible organizing team for Indivisible of West Central Illinois, and this is us. This was an example of the Backfire Model, where we children in cages, right? You don't let them marginalize them. You don't let them dehumanize them. And doing protests that kept that going did help with that. Not nearly enough. And of course, we weren't ready for that when that need arose. We've gotten better at it. But then along about 2017, our Indivisible group had problems because some people wanted to organize for racial justice. Others really wanted to confront Trump, and others really wanted to stick with the book clubs and the nonviolent workshops. And, they couldn't come to consensus. But our people were suffering. Our friends, our loved ones, our family members, our family of friends, our community members, and so my students. So we decided instead it's time to form our own org, and we did that. So in 2019, they laid off a bunch of people at WIU, and that's me in the front there with a long scarf. I wish I would have known it was hanging down my back, because I remember thinking, why am I so cold? But, doing this protest, that is Sherman Hall. That is the seat of power at Western Illinois University. And when I was there, I didn't organize that. I was identified as the organizer, but I was just that my union did that. And they just asked for some logistical support and somebody to do the call out. I'm a big mouth, so I got no problem, grabbing a megaphone and doing some chants, because I'm a I marched in drum corps for 2 years, so I have no problem making a complete fool of myself. You haven't really screwed up till you've screwed up a soprano bugle solo to 25,000 people. After I did that as a young person, everything else is gravy. And so I looked at this though, and I remember thinking, where are all of our colleagues? Where's all the white folks who work here? This was just about everybody in that crowd are either union members or people who are being laid off and targeted. And they were primarily Black folks and women, people of color, international. It was just really appalling. And we'll get into that later. But yeah, that protest, I really expected there to come out more out of that. No, WIU wanted to jettison programs that were deemed just too multicultural because there's just way too many white people with white privilege in there. So then our community did a hate campaign against WIU's Black president a few months later, because after they jettisoned all those people, over 100, I forget, Meryl will be able to tell you in the chat, however many were laid off. But the people who made those decisions misrepresented why they needed to make that decision. And they also made it without considering the ramifications. If you're going to jettison 130 some families from a small town community, and all of them had really good jobs and contributed to your nonprofits and ate in your restaurants and stayed in your hotels, and their families came here to visit, and all of a sudden they all up and leave and walk away from their homes, then our economy that summer just crashed. And so that ended up, that was never investigated. That was a hate crime. And yet, because there was so many, it was a town gown coordinated event. We had people from even Rep. Noreen Hammond's office were in on that. Some of our cops, nurses, doctors, WIU BOT members, faculty, staff, past and present. They were just on there online, hating on the man and whatever else that request for him to be removed might have been about. The second they did a racist hate crime about it, then it didn't have to be about anything else, because the impact of that, and that's the truth, as white people, it doesn't matter what our intent is. The impact of it is what we have to deal with and what we have to make amends for when we've harmed somebody. So after that Fire Jack campaign, the Dem women did organize with the NAACP at one of our historical Black churches. And we did a data collection in there, just asking people, predominantly our Black folks who were there, some simple questions such as, when I first became aware of the Fire Jack campaign, I felt, and let them fill out whatever qualitative information they wanted, because, and then they filled out whatever context they did. And then we took all those, we plugged them into a Wordle, and a Wordle does a frequency algorithm that the most frequently mentioned words are the largest. So the word that's largest here from our Black community as a result of that was afraid, right? It made them feel afraid. We couldn't get anyone to investigate this crime, but the white leaders of our community decided that they would hold a lot of, they would just go in and, well, we'll get into what happened, but it was nothing that addressed any of these concerns here, that it was racist, that they felt hurt, invisible, in danger. None of that happened. And that still remains to this day a hate crime that has never been investigated, for which nobody's been held accountable but our Black community members. And many that summer, to be clear, as a Dem precinct committee person after that happened, I the only precinct committee person that walked every precinct in Macomb and a lot of them in the other counties who wasn't running for an office. And when I spoke to my Black constituents, most of them were moving out because they felt that that was a signal that the community wanted them gone. And if they didn't move out, they'd be at risk. And we can draw a direct line path to the hatred, intimidation, and hate group operating in this community to that time. And a lot of those homes still sit empty on the market. They walked away and didn't even get their. So the message that, I think that I have learned is that we all as white people live on the white racial frame. And the white racial frame is the system of our culture, systems of government, service, education that was built primarily by, of course, white people like us who designed it to work for people like us. And that white frame, is very large. We each have our space that we're standing on in it. Some of us are up near the top with class privilege, and others of us are somewhere. Most of us are in the middle, and some of us are on the right. Some of us are on the left. No, Joey, go lay down. Sorry, my dog is already like, I have to go out. No. And so, you think about who's not in that frame, and it's everybody who is ground down underneath it constantly, because they don't even have the privilege of being on the frame. But we can each shake the frame from where we are. We don't have to climb to the top and start knocking people off of it, right? I can stand there in my white privilege and say, you know what? I'm in this meeting with these other people. I've been invited to this book club, and it's all white here. Why is that? Right? That's shaking the white racial frame from the space I'm in. And we can all do that. It just takes practice and courage, and know you're not going to do it perfectly, and you're going to get a lot of blowback. You'll get better at it, and you'll get better at knowing that their responses, white people's feelings about it, are ours. And that's on us to deal with. And we have no right to say, wait a minute, I want this whole space to slow down to my comfort level. I've done that. So hope I don't do it again. That summer in 2019 and in the summer of 2018, our state rep, Noreen Hammond, and that is her right there, marched with a hate group, an anti-LGBTQ racist hate group that operates out of Pekin called the Sons of Liberty, but they also call themselves the Liberty Bells, and they would march with these hate signs in parades all over West Central Illinois. And then in the fall of 2019, they marched in Western's parade, and that was when we saw it. So we ended up writing a letter to the editor about it. We ended up doing a public comment about it. I wrote letters to WIU because it was there. They hadn't taken action to prevent it. They didn't call it out. There was no public apology or acknowledgement of it, but at the very least, they did change things so it won't happen again. But since most of the community doesn't even know it even happened, then what does that do for our diverse LGBTQ people like me who are like, well, where's our justice, right? Where did we get validation for that? We didn't. In your community, if you want to know how Black folks are being treated, check out Black Twitter, do Black @ and whatever your community name is, whatever your higher ed institutions are. You'll learn a lot about your community. And in our documents, we link up to a lot of screenshots. And I would ask you to look at those and just ask yourself, would you feel comfortable sending your child to a school where Black students were relating the kind of things that are being related in there? Now, back in, I'm trying to remember when this was 2020, fairly early, but after I read that tweet that said that they had been stalked and harmed by a truck throwing beer bottles at them, I had remembered the morning after Trump was elected, I went to Aldi, I added the S, didn't I? Aldi, and I saw that truck there, and I thought, oh, all right, well, here it comes. So I pulled out my camera and took a picture of it. And then I just hung on to it because I thought, well, there's going to be things coming. And then after I found out that trucks had been harassing our students already and our Black folks in the community, then I put that on the public record, and that ended up appearing in Capital Facts as a story. That guy on the right, he is in not full body armor, but he's got armor on. He was really reactive. He situated himself across from a Black Lives Matter protest that was a grassroots protest run by Black mothers with Black or biracial children. And they stood there, with their kids. And this guy was so reactive to that we had asked, why have the police not made a contact? They're like, well, he has his free rights. Okay, well, the guy was so reactive, we were afraid that he was armed and that he'd pull out a gun and just start shooting. So we called that out and said the police should have done their job, going up there and having a discussion with him, just reminding him that, yes, he has every right to counter protest, but he does not have the right to interfere with someone's First Amendment rights. So if your police are not acting proper at protests, you do need to start dealing with that now. later on that year, there was a protest because they got so mad at what we were doing in the community, talking about Black Lives Matter, asking for our police to be investigated. That summer we held in summer of 2019 was our first Affidavit Workshop. That is something that will change your white people. Brian Stevenson is a Harvard-trained lawyer who works on Alabama's death row. And he is someone who really goes over, talks about how important it is to get what you call proximity to people who are suffering the injustice, because you can't really help people, white people with white privilege, understand what it means to be disparately impacted by injustice when you don't see it, never experience it, don't have anybody suffering from it. But when you get them near it, we held that Affidavit Workshop. We advertised it where Black folks could come in, and then we would use our tech privilege, our education, our white privilege, or whatever tools we had, our economic privilege, to be able to help them fill out complaints. And we tried to submit them to the Illinois Attorney General. We didn't know what we were doing. We were trying to get justice wherever we could, because we just knew we couldn't get it in this county. And we released our concerns about that. And after that Affidavit Workshop, I will tell you that our entire team, every single person who attended, and we did invite county board members, city leaders, they came out of there very changed people about the way that they saw their own community, that many of them that had grown up here and lived in their whole lives, they had no idea about what some of the things that were happening. And you really don't know what you don't know until you talk to people, and then you get at the evidence. So our cops decided, or one of the cop families decided, oh, those poor police, all those horrible Dem women and their racial justice coalition are just being so merciless and just cruel to them, because they only have all the training and the guns and the power and the right. And all we have is cardboard and our big mouths and our fierce hearts, and stand there and hoping we don't get our butts kicked. So we decided when they were going to hold a Back the Blue protest around City Hall with our police leaders, our city leadership, our county leadership, our people were devastated. And they were just telling us how hurt they were. So we decided that we would pragmatically pick a few people and just ask anybody who's willing to stand up there with us to go and counter protest. And we did that peacefully, so they couldn't claim that we were disruptive, so it wouldn't give them an excuse to harm our Black folks there. But there were, the news report said 100 people, but our count was over 200 at one point. And there were people there with all kinds of problematic messaging, Blue Lives Matter flags, which is what you would call a dirty narrative, meaning that to white people with white privilege who have no Black friends, they really believe it's just about supporting the police. But when you have people who have suffered at the hands of the police, as our Dem women's leadership team did, we also know that that means something very different to our Black folks and to us. And that's what we talk about. Propaganda can be disparate impact and be completely understood by people spreading it. And that's definitely a truism. And we watched all of our city leaders, they just walked past us like we weren't even human. And they went around shaking all the hands. It's still under COVID, right? They're going around shaking everyone's hands, taking their picture. Rep. Noreen Hammond was there. And then some truck with a Dixie horn kept going by, and they would cheer for it, but it wasn't racist. And then we got visited by the Westboro Baptist Church because they were mad about an openly gay football player who was visiting from another. And you know what? This community poured out the entire community's heart to oppose this small group of people, largely whom, for all intents and purposes, they really are not a threat, right? And they wouldn't have any impact at all if people didn't show up to oppose them, but they try to provoke people so then they could turn around and sue them. And you should be aware of that. That's another reason to always adhere to nonviolence. That way you don't get yourself into trouble with that. But I watched this community and a lot of people who hate on us and hate on our Macomb Pride org and hate on our racial justice coalition at that event. And I just thought, well, it's really easy to be in a whole, in a horde and stand across from a greatly overpowered group and scream at them, right? It's quite something different to confront your friends and family across the dinner table and say, what you said was racist and awful and offensive. And if you ever say that again, this is going to be the consequence in our lives and our relationship, right? A lot of people aren't that. But standing up and hating on this group of people, pretty easy, right? it was almost fetishized. It was really interesting, I will say. Some of you in our red communities have seen these. There was a lot of communities where they found young people willing to help out, and they bagged up all these racist messaging with rocks, and then they drove them around in the early morning hours and threw them out of a truck into people's yards just to basically harass, threaten. And this is white domestic terrorism, and we need to call that out explicitly for what it is. It is egregiously, it's harmful, it is a warning. We should take it as that is them organizing and trying to find other people to organize with. And that's what January 6th was really about. Now, a few weeks ago, actually, it might have been a little bit longer, and correct me in the chat if I'm wrong about that, but this local dispatcher posted this awful meme, and I'm not going to comment on the meme, but what we did was we called it out explicitly on the Racial Justice Coalition's wall. And this fall, they went nonpartisan, they went grassroots. We broke them away from the Dem women so they could shed their partisan label and become far more larger, effective, and be able to message. And we are now working in 12 counties actively. But the blowback to this, the 911 director acted appropriately when that appeared online. And we asked Socratic questions. We asked, is this the kind of thing that, we want to see our 911 dispatchers engaging in? And then they decided they were going to retaliate on us, and in particular me. And they have been relentlessly since. And that includes some of our jailers, some of our cops. And there is a hate group that was set up in our community in early 2020 that was set up by a cop family, we think, that needs to be investigated. And they just pretty much were set up explicitly to shut me up, to hate on that awful, crazy Heather McMeekan. And I'm not going to claim that my mental health is great. I'm a survivor of child abuse. I live with PTSD. I do it openly. I talk about it to end stigma and help other people, learn about their symptoms, because that would have been helpful to me. But they trolled through all of my stuff, and they just I can't post anything that doesn't appear on there, and then they just denigrate it. And you know what? I've been attacked and harassed and threatened and whatever many times. In 2012, a Right to Life website took a photo of me with my infant son and posted on their website and doxed me. And in 2012, that was very traumatizing. I didn't have an org to back me up. It was just me and my online activist friends, and they were mad at me for organizing for Obamacare on Twitter, and also trying to organize a women's march then. But we made a mistake. Our leadership team was all white, so it failed. Never making that mistake again. And I'm never organizing on all white teams again, because you're just not as effective, and you really waste a lot of time, and you just don't have the impact that you could have. And I'm running out of time for this. So monetizing hate. And Sam will be talking about this later, but this is in Canton, Illinois. But I want to point out something explicitly to you. This is white Christian nationalism right there, right? Once divided, now united, don't repeat history. And there's so much cross messaging here, right? But I want to show you this flag in particular, because this has just started appearing in our counties. And we take this as a very explicit threat, and I will be contacting our contact in the Illinois State Police over this one, because that flag in particular is flown by people who make a commitment not to give any quarter, meaning they're not going to take prisoners. They're not going to investigate you. They're not going to hold you. They will just kill you. And now a bunch of people are buying that flag, and you can bet a lot of them know exactly what they're doing, and they're flying it all over that county and several others. I haven't seen it in McDonough County yet. We do have people watching the homes, but that's kind of what it is. So let's see, getting in. And I think that's it for let me just make sure I got past all right. So we're not at questions yet. So I'm going to just stop the screen share and go. So now we're going to introduce a few people to talk about some of the things that they've had. Megan, are you on tonight for Adams County? I didn't see Megan in here. So if not, I'm just going to cover Adams County.
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, Megan. Let us know about what's happening. You want to talk about the Tea Party group that got shut down? Feel free. Go ahead.
Well, I kind of don't know where to start, because it's been a good 2 years that I've been harassed by the local bullies in the community. I share a heart with Heather. I lived and was married and lived for a decade in outside of Macomb, Illinois, and another sundown town called Marietta. But so I'm familiar with everything that Heather's talking about, the local officials, the mayor, Noreen, all of them. I'm born and raised in Quincy, and the first time that things really started happening was when Ronnie Quinn developed a Reopen Adams County group. She's actually, her family's from Galesburg, and she moved here in her teens, and she has a desperate need for attention, whatever is lacking in her life. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we don't need to
Yeah.
talk about the individuals too much, but definitely the
Right.
pattern
And
that you were seeing was Tea Party
so
patterns.
she created a group of 10,000 people, and they would dox people, they would harass people. There's a few other people that have been through what I have. There's a gentleman that owns 5 businesses in Quincy, and he's the one that doxed me. He put my email, my cell phone, my address, my driver's license, plates, my vehicle, everything out on social media. And over 300 people in the community commented. I knew most of them. So my Facebook page became small, but also the Justice for Jazz, the protests that Heather helped organize in our community. I marched along with Jazz, and I'm very committed and involved with her family in the court case that's going against Steve Holman. He's also part of the Reopen group, which a couple days before Christmas got shut down for false information permanently. So I got my Christmas present early.
Thank you so much, Megan. I'm sorry, I do have to move on to the next
Okay.
person because we have so
Sorry.
many.
Sorry.
No, you're great. We have a document for you so you can see that Tea Party sent a bus to the January 6th treason event in DC.
Yeah.
And they didn't think they were going to get in any trouble at all, but you know, and we made sure that that was handled. So now I'm going to bring up Dr. Merrill Cole from WIU to speak about the extremism at WIU and the whitewashing that's been happening. And at this point, I'm going to reaffirm at this point that the Racial Justice Coalition affirms the call from our Black Student Association for a demand to have African American studies reinstalled right now, a demand that a Board of Trustees member who may have violated the Open Meetings Act to interrupt them and thwart them from bringing up their concerns about Title IX and civil rights violations during the last Board of Trustees member, and then denigrated or invalidated their concerns. And then they were pressured into a private meeting to accept an apology, a written apology. They didn't want to do that. And I will say that at this point, you know, they have called for that Board of Trustees member to step down or be removed based on that. That may have not only violated the Open Meetings Act, but my concern is that the administration at WIU, of which I am I'm alumni, both for my master's and undergrad, and their footprint is, you know, I live in the footprint of its shadow here. But for the last 8 semesters since the Fire Jack campaign was ramping up, the Black Student Association leaders have been required by the administration, every time they brought up concerns, they're pulled into private conversations. And the only Black folks that they have in there from the administration, they keep bringing in a Black building service worker, right? He has no power to help them. And then they run them through the semester, meeting after meeting, and they never resolve anything. And those students may have had their rights violated. When that Open Meetings Act was potentially violated, the administration should have told them that may be a Title IX violation, that may be an Open Meetings Act violation, it needs to be investigated. You would have the right to even put in an Ethics Act violation or complaint against that Board of Trustees member. But at no time do I believe, by what they've told us, that they have ever been told that these things are rights violations by our administration. How can an administration, a higher ed administration, tell a Black Student Association leadership repeatedly to just, oh, thank you for your leadership, let's have a quiet conversation, not move on? Okay, Merrill, I'm going to turn it over to you. Are you
Okay,
on?
well, Heather, you already said a lot of the stuff that I was going to say, so I do still have some stuff to say. I wanted, first of all, to talk about the African American Studies major in more detail. It was shut down by the Thomas administration and the board of trustees that was set up by Governor Rauner. And very unfortunately, it is very unfortunate that a Black professor shut down, a Black president shut down the African American Studies major, but that's what happened. And I will give you a link here in the chat. I wrote an editorial in the Peoria Star Herald about this. But since this happened, and since the administrations have changed, there's been a constant promise from the administration to bring back African American studies some way, somehow, but it seems like they really don't want to do it. So I completely back the Black Student Association in their calls to reinstate this major. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to talk about is my support for Heather and white liberals in Macomb. Okay, so I didn't really know Heather for years when I was first here. I got to know her I was a founding member of Indivisible of West Central Illinois, and we started working together then, and I really appreciated her terrific web and organizing skills, and we've been working together ever since then. And I've been working behind the scenes mostly with the Racial Justice Coalition and with Democratic Women also. But ever since people started noticing that I was talking with Heather, white person after white person, these are people that I thought were good people, politically left people, progressive people, would tell me, oh, well, you know, that Heather, she's this or she's that. Most of these people were too genteel to call her crazy, but that was the sort of bottom line about it. And what I realized, and this is true in the spectrum from the far right crazies to the so-called white liberals, is that they would rather discredit the messenger. They would rather shoot the messenger than even hear the message or even seriously consider the message. So that's been an observation that I've had for a number of years, and I just wanted to share that. Heather is not crazy. Heather is sometimes under great duress, but she's not crazy. I also wanted to tell you that Heather is right now under extreme financial duress. I cannot explain to you, I cannot articulate the reasons for that, but I have contributed, and I would encourage anybody who can to contribute to her PayPal, which I am also posting in the talk, because Heather has been a fearless advocate for all these great causes for so many years, but she's had our back. Now we need to have hers, and that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Meryl. I appreciate that. We have a lot of people hurting right now. So now I'll open it up. Sam, did you want to add anything about Mason County? Otherwise, we'll go to questions. Okay, let's head to questions.
Okay, so I thought that Jim McGrath got his question answered in the chat, but I guess he didn't. So Jim is first.
Yeah, so Heather, it's kind of I'm just throwing an idea out. Your issue with law enforcement and hate groups, does it make sense for us? My first thought, does it make sense for us to do FOIA requests?
Yes.
Or is that like too harsh a start? Should we be asking if there's a requirement within the village, any village employee joining hate groups?
So
I'm just trying to, what do you think is the best approach?
You know, what we're going to do is we'll hold a tactics workshop and we'll do FOIAs, but I will tell you that we use FOIAs after we spent months patterning, we did several campaigns that put Black Lives Matter in front of everybody. We bought a button maker. We made 1,000 buttons in the summer of 2020. We ended up spreading them out everywhere. At first, people were like, "Ooh, no," or "No, I don't want that," you know. And then we just started out everywhere, and now people are afraid not to take our buttons because they're afraid of being seen as, "Oh, of course I have no problem taking your button. Of course I'll wear it," because they got punished mercilessly if they didn't, right? And then we FOIA'd to find out what they said about that. That's what you do, is you confront, or rather you challenge, right? You do a public comment, you make a statement, and then you FOIA to see what they say about it. And that's when we found out a whole bunch of our cops hate us. Our chief was being duplicitous. I'll be right with you, Joey. And that's problematic. Now, I want to state one other thing. I'm going to bring in Danny here to talk just for 2 minutes about her experience at Western, because where there is racism, and I want all white liberals to hear me on this, racism is the broadest lens to use in justice organizing, because racism and white supremacy is the floor upon which all other injustices leverage. And where you see racism and hate, you will see misogyny. And so now Danny's going to talk to you for just 2 minutes about her experience while I let my dog out before he drives me nuts.
Okay, thank you, Heather. So I'm Danny. I am a Western Illinois graduate from 2021, and I'm going to try to make this really quick. Heather knows I could speak on this for hours just because it's so, I'll just read what I typed out. Early morning, September 24th, 2017, I was raped at an off-campus apartment by another WIU student. I did not process what had happened until I was back in my dorm shower washing the blood off my legs. I went to OPS, the Office of Public Safety, and reported the incident. I was so ashamed of myself. OPS was very professional and assured me it was not my fault. In fact, the Office of Public Safety at WIU seemed like the only people in the community that supported me. I was then driven to the hospital where I received a sexual assault kit. This lasted 5 hours. This was by far the most humiliating and violating event that I have ever gone through. I was told to relax or I would make the pain worse. I was alone in a hospital room while my roommate had to wait in the waiting room. That night I went home and wanted to die. I was too ashamed to tell my parents, and they did not find out for a few days. On the 25th, I was taken to Macomb Police Department for questioning. I had to give my statement verbally as well as written. I also had my phone taken from me and scanned into a computer for evidence. On July 14th, 2021, I was given access to my reports from WIU, 150 pages that I did not know, 154 pages that I did not know existed. I'd gone to the police department before multiple times to see if my rape kit had come back and was told that they didn't know. In 2021, I found out that my rape kit was not ever sent out for testing until the December after my assault. I was never notified it was sent out for testing, although I assumed it went out the next day. When it returned almost 6 months after it was sent out, I was also not aware that it had come back positive for male DNA in my body. 4 years later, I went to the Macomb Police Department with a representative who demanded I get access to everything, and they just handed it over. That day, sitting in the interview room of Macomb Police Department, I read through my entire report. I read through the state's attorney's letter months before saying that there was not enough evidence beyond reasonable doubt. No charges would be filed. I felt defeated and like I had lost. What constitutes as enough evidence for a victim? And this is the last part. I took this from the report from Title IX at Western. Based on the totality of the circumstances and information obtained pursuant to this investigation, there is sufficient information presented that a hearing panel could make reasonable determine as the charge of sexual assault. January 16th, 2018, my report was sent to Student Judicial Board for hearing. However, since the other party was encouraged to leave the university so this did not hinder his academic career, the hearing did not happen. I was then informed that they ended up dropping from the university, so he got away scot-free. While I was fighting to keep my scholarships that the university was trying to take from me because I was too depressed to make it to class. After 1,565 days, I've given up all hope at this point for my case, but I feel it is my duty to make sure this never happens again to anyone at Western Illinois University, a place where we are supposed to call home and where we are supposed to be safe.
Thank you, Danny. And I will say that we have handled now 12 cases of sexual assault where we could not get WIU to, well, there needs to be a civil rights inquiry into the way that leadership handles cases. So any other questions? And Danny, I'm so sorry that that happened to you, and thank you so much for your bravery and sharing that. It is really important for people to know that when a leadership of an institution becomes far more white and far more male, and they jettison women's studies and they devalue the women's center and they take away all of its staff and get rid of the counselors and such, it affects a campus a lot. It affects the campus a lot.
Thank you, Danny. Rose is the next one in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Mercy. And I, first of all, want to thank everyone, Heather, Danny, your testimonials are profound, and we can just hope that we can help in some way, shape, or fashion. My question, Heather, has to do with race class narrative, the documentation, the study, better said, by Anachenko Rosario, Anihani Lopez, and Heather McGee. Is this something you've looked at? It's something I've been trying to get a handle on, and I'm wondering if you have any advice, if you've used it, and if you have, how should we be applying it?
I'm not familiar with that one, but I'm certainly happy to look at it. We've listed resources, but my approach to organizing is, our people are IT and gamer nerds, right, and geeks. And so we organize like as if we are playing a video game, I mean, in terms of strategically. And so we don't go after the horde that is infected. We don't try to talk to them or whatever. We specifically focus at the people creating the horde and the ones turning them loose and the ones trying to break down our gates and let them in, right? And by that, I mean going after the few people. I don't have to fight this whole community. There's just a few people leveraging their power in a way that silences people's ability to speak up for the harm done to them. So if we can structurally go after holding bad faith public servants accountable, creating new systems and structures of government, there must be watchdogging, there has to be discussions, and there's a seat of power in your county Dem parties. But our county Dem party got tired of people like me asking them to do something. And so they actually change the bylaws to put in what they call a no issue stance. Show up for nobody, do a dinner once a year, a 1 hour meeting once a month, maybe do a fundraiser, canvass if there's a candidate, but beyond that, show up for nobody, speak up for nothing, oppose nothing. And you know what? That leaves us with a hopeless situation because we can't challenge power. We can't build a party. We can't build a structures of government. And as it turns out, when you live in a red community that was built on the structures built by class privileged white conservative men, they can just opt not to ever do anything for you. So, and that's what they've done. Sorry, I have no idea why all of a sudden, I'm guessing that they're canceling or making school go remote the night before. So, tactically, I would say what's most priority, Bonnie Kurowski had put in here, you have got to make sure every single civil servant and all your librarians and all your people handling your offices know how to handle the Open Meetings Act, know how to handle FOIAs, because insurgents will come in, and the link of change in insurgency, most people participating in it have no idea how they are linked together to destroy our democracy. In our community, this insurgency group worked with the same people who did the Fire Jack campaign, the same people running the hate group against me, the same people organizing who are on our Chamber of Commerce and WIU administrators, faculty, and staff, past and present. And they are literally causing us to, they helped set up little groups from Awake, Illinois in every school district here to basically get anti-masking GQP or QAnoners in those seats so that then they just destroy your local schools, and they do it from within, right? So that's how you interrupt them. You make sure, and they monetize that by filing nuisance FOIAs. Then they get the fees for that. And then they turn around and send that to fund insurgent candidates to run for the seats after they have been so mean, they've run out good faith public servants. You need watchdogs at every meeting. You need people who will record those meetings, because a lot of the Republicans have learned if you don't record it, there's no transcript and you can't hold people accountable on the public record. There's just so many tactics to learn, and we've been learning them as we go, but know that they do work. You only have to find a few that really work. You inoculate your community. You make sure people know what to expect. You watchdog so that you can have early detection and response. You plan for responses. You get a team ready, someone who's always going to be willing to get up to the camera at the spur of the moment and say, you know what, this just happened today and that's not okay. You know, and so those tactics can be effective.
Hey, there's another, Diane Orr has a question and she needs to leave. So I'm going to have her ask, and she was next anyway.
Great.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Marcy, and thank you so much, Heather. You are a dynamic speaker. I wish I could take notes as quickly as you were sharing information. Well, I have a quick question and comment. Have you ever talked to the people at Southern Poverty Law Center about the threats that you've received?
Not the threats yet, because what I learned that summer of 2019, when we were first organizing, after we held our Affidavit Workshop and we realized, oh my gosh, all this stuff is right here in our community. We reached out to SIU School of Law. We reached out to the Southern Poverty Law Center, ADL. I joined the board of the, oh my gosh, we reached out to everybody we could. And the conversations that we heard were, you don't even have anyone in power to help you. You have no structures of government to even get data points on the record with which to push. You're going to have to build a government. You're going to have to get your press working or try to make your own press, you know, and that means blogs and teaching people social media use or whatever. And you're going to have to start putting all the data points on the record so that they eventually tell a story that then you can take to the authorities and get something done. And we finally, after 3 years of organizing, we finally just this week got one of our police officers held accountable for not properly investigating a double homicide that Sam and I witnessed in the late afternoon, right before our Take Back the Night event in the spring. And the cop didn't investigate it properly and allowed the evidence to be destroyed. So we don't even know who that person was. So yeah, that was really something.
Yeah, well, the reason I mentioned that is that Southern Poverty Law Center was instrumental in getting an extremist hate group bankrupted. Yes, bankrupted in a city in Idaho for harassing a realtor.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely want to find out about that.
And Marcy and Terry both know about this case. We've talked about it a lot, and I'm happy to put my email in the chat too if you want to talk more. And so good. I hope that might lead to something. Thank you
so much. Yeah, we will. And I've dropped my email in the chat. And if somebody could drop that link again to our presentation document, we have linked up very deep evidence links in there. You could read for days and days and days on our stuff and never see all of it, but there's plenty of tactics in there, explanations about why we did what we did, how we did it. But it basically works like this. You go and challenge. You don't let them silence you. You challenge it on the public record. You keep doing it, and then you FOIA it to see what your public servants are saying about it. And then you hold them accountable if they're saying things they shouldn't be saying. And they don't like that.
Yeah, right.
And actually, Terry has put that link in the chat probably 4 or 5 times. Go Terry. So
I'm looking to find it again.
and Heather, you rock. I think Jim had another question, and then Samantha Case had a question. And I think so far those are the only other 2 I've seen.
I'm listening, but I gotta let my dog in because it's too cold out for him. I'll be right back. But I am listening. I can see you. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, okay, so Jim is next and then Samantha. I don't, okay, and then I guess there's another question in the chat from Karen after that.
Kind of a general question. If Macomb, Western Illinois University, is a state-funded organization,
Yes, it is.
how can what happened to Danny be allowed to happen without consequences? Who is in charge?
We need a civil rights inquiry. Western can, this is my opinion. I'm speaking as a precinct committee person here, and as someone who has a loved one who attends Western. I don't believe it can be fixed from the leadership from within because most of the leadership grew up here.
Right.
About 8 years ago, they stopped being, maybe 6 years ago, they stopped being able to attract qualified people for a lot of the jobs. So they would just keep promoting from within. And a lot of the people they promoted were people who grew up together here, grew up with our cops, grew up with each other. And a lot of them hold the same biases. And that's not to say I mean, it's just a cultural thing. But if you always, are in the same spaces with the people you grew up with, that's a recipe for a lot of myopic decision making, right? And so we really need a civil rights inquiry. We need the good people of the state of Illinois to look at what's happening to Western. I'm pretty sure you all would not have chosen to have, I certainly would never move to a community had I known that it was going to turn into that Western was going to jettison anything that has the word Black or African-American studies or women's studies, because those things are just not attracting those good white rural kids, right? Good white rural men. But the messaging is super problematic, and you can look at how it's gone and the effect of it on people like Danny and our Black students. And Danny is one, to be clear, Danny is one of like 12 in the last couple of years that we've tracked. And as it turns out, Western killed several stories of these, including one where it was a local woman who had just gotten her first job on campus and was sexually assaulted. And one of the students reported it, and WIU said, well, you know what? She's just a contractor. She's not one of ours, so we don't have to do anything about it. Yeah.
So why don't they turn it? So the police won't do anything? Is that why they don't turn it over to them?
Well, there's a lot there. We could go on that all night, Jim, and I will definitely tell you about, but there's a lot of deficits, right? There's oversight deficits, there's transparency. Several years ago, Western decided that they would take away the ban on administrators and faculty from hitting on students and seeing them as dating sources, and made it where it's on the students to rebuff every one of those and hold them accountable. And yet when they try to hold them accountable, that's a problem, right? So where there is racism, there is misogyny. Getting rid of African-American studies and women's studies. And let me call out one other blatant narrative that is just blatantly racist. They claim that they had to get rid of African-American studies because of low major numbers. Guess what? In a majority white community that's always been majority white, a majority white institution with almost all white leadership, that messages and markets primarily the white programs that appeal to mostly white students, you are always going to struggle to fill majors in those programs. But our African-American studies program and our women's studies, to be clear, were very popular programs with the students. Even if they weren't majors, they informed. Who thinks that having an institution that trains the nation's cop administrators, we're the largest undergraduate training for the law enforcement and justice administration of the land. All of your cops and those who run them come from our town. And our people train them. And yet they're at an institution that jettisoned philosophy. They tried to get rid of history. They got rid of women's studies, African-American studies. They jettisoned any of the buildings that had Black names on them. They homogenized the campus. And now it's like, honestly, it resembles more like a Liberty U. And for the problems that people have brought to our org because they didn't have any help on campus, it's been heartbreaking, infuriating, and that is why I am just saying we need a civil rights inquiry into how our Black students have been repeatedly treated. To force Black students to just have meeting after meeting after meeting that just steals their time in academic life and adds stress to them just to kind of hide what's happened. Well, That's what an investigation will reveal. But the effect of it is what should have happened after that that board of trustees member, in my mind, as I am a trained Title IX investigator. Okay, so when I wasn't at that board meeting, but when it happened, and that Open Meetings Act, that should have gone to the Illinois AG public access counselor to ask for a determination. Did that violate the Open Meetings Act? And if it did, that would violate the Ethics Act, and then that would violate those students' Title IX. Then they should investigate that, because the fact they were bringing up crimes happening against them, violations of their civil rights, was that done in service to obstruction of justice, which would then be a felony, right? I mean, this is a very serious thing, and yet they were told, oh, well, here's a letter from her and you should accept that. And nobody on the administration told them what their rights were and told them that they could file for these things. Is that okay at an institution of higher ed?
Yeah, and Heather, there's a couple other questions, and then we have a couple announcements. So I think we're going. Jim, did you get your question answered? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but we're gonna move on. Samantha, you had a question?
Yeah, I was I have volunteered for a rape crisis center, so I was wondering, is there a way that you have or that you can hold nurses accountable? Because I know there is some oversight in terms of there's supposed to be a safe nurse or a sexual assault nurse examiner that does those kits, and I can't imagine that it sounds as though she was at all thoughtful about how she was doing, if not more traumatizing. So I was just wondering if there's.
I'll let you know that our district hospital is run primarily by right-wing conservatives. Our victim services has my abuser, former cop, and our mayor, Mike Inman, sitting over it at the Western Illinois Regional Center. And I did a speak out about him when I found out that he was still hitting on our students, to call out his tactics so that people would know what he was doing. Well, here's the thing. Our victim services even is almost all white. Most of them are Trump voting Republicans. A lot of them are Second Amendment, Blue Lives Matter types, and have that messaging not only on their Facebook pages, but throughout the building. So a lot of our Black folks won't even go to the victim services. And I certainly can't go there because of, well, I would not be safe going there with my abuser on their board. And I did go to their board meeting with Merrill and let them know, I spoke out about this and you all just decided that you were going to ignore me and my concerns. And then, you know what Western did about that with that mayor? When I did my speak out, every one of my colleagues at WIU turned their backs on me in that park that day. And I knew that was going to happen. I wasn't there for them. I was there to say my truth and to protect our students, because Western was not. But then this semester, they invited the mayor back to talk to our Black students about how to stay safe in our community.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Okay, one more. Karen. Karen, do you have a question? Well, maybe she left.
Sorry
Oh.
about that. No, I was actually wondering, because I actually live in a suburb of Chicago, but I was at a Zoom meeting where Heather was speaking, and I just felt her message was very powerful, and I saw that she was also giving this discussion here today. So I was just wondering what friends from the suburbs of Chicago can help with the rural community. Is there anything that we could do to?
Yes, there's many things that we need help with, not the least of which is, we lack reporters who are safe reporting on these issues. Our reporters, to be clear, who tried to hold either our public officials or our cops accountable, have been retaliated on. We have a sheriff who's a menace, and he has retaliated on multiple journalists, and shoved them out of this community in fear. And that should be investigated as well. But what we really need from all the rest of the people is, please follow our platforms, elevate the things on there. Please report the Sarah Ellen Jonas hate group, because it's our cops on there, our 911 dispatchers on there, our county board members on there, right? And they are hating on us 24/7, trying to just get us in trouble, shut us up. They dox me, they put all my information out there, and and it's ruined. Well, let's just say that I am definitely living the civil rights organizer life right now, and it's okay. I knew what I signed up for, but I know what it means to not be able to call 911 for help and have any expectation that you're going to get something good out of it. Yet I still have white privilege. I still have a lot of privilege compared to our Black folks. I'm certainly not at risk the way that they are. We also need letters to the editor. We need demands for investigation of WIU. We need demands for investigation into our sheriff. We need people willing to file FOIAs. And what we do is we file FOIAs in each other's communities, because that way they can't go after the person in that community for it. And then when you file that FOIA, we do something that we've coined investigative activism. Because of the sort of nexus of where they have destroyed the First Amendment of our students and us as community members, and we can't get it reported on safely without there being dangerous blowback, even stuff that destroys people's lives, and it has here repeatedly. And like I've said, a lot of our members, then it would be really helpful if there would be people who would just be willing to send a FOIA. And then when you get it back, you just release that to either your press or our press. But what we normally do is we make press kits. And that's how we were able to get rid of our chief, who at the time was teaching at WIU and got his master's from there. And we have a document out there. Sam, can you drop the link to the Chief Barker document? He's no longer our chief. We first called for him to step down in the spring of 2020 after our police gave a developmentally disabled, mentally a man with mental health issues who is Black and impoverished and just a dear of a human being. He's a lovely person, but he operates with the worldview of a fourth grader. And in the middle of winter, they gave him a one-way ticket to the streets of Chicago with no money, and didn't tell his caregiver in this community, and then lied to his caregiver and us repeatedly about not knowing where he was. But they had bought a ticket, stuck him on that train. He ended up in Chicago, not knowing where to go. We had to organize, and you can look that up. That's called Missing by Design, hashtag Missing by Design. That was our first backfire attempt at trying to stop an injustice as it was happening. They finally did admit, oh yeah, by the way, I guess we do know where he is. We sent him on a train to Chicago. And then they were able to get him, bring him back. He had frostbitten feet. His whole family had suffered. His mother has cancer. You know, I mean, it was just, and then nobody in the leadership of this city even admitted it was wrong. They all just were like, well, he deserved it, you know, and they attacked his caregiver brother, also an impoverished person. It was appalling. And what we needed out of that was we needed people to share those stories. You can help rural areas by helping us detroll our local walls for our media. So you could go to the McDonough County Voice and report every hateful post, because you know what? They don't have the staff to detroll their media. We have to do that. We do not have a cyberstalking lawsuit or cyberstalking statute with any teeth in it, because it's empowered by the Violence Against Women Act. And now you know why the Republicans under no circumstances are ever going to reemploy VAWA, because that would give us teeth in the federal cyberstalking statute that would have allowed us to shut a lot of this down. Facebook has gamed the algorithm and it has changed tremendously, because it used to be that we could self-police as admins. They took that away from us. We can't even do that. We can't report. It used to be that you were never allowed to run a fake profile just to harass and stalk, but that's allowed too. We need host liability legislation for social media, because we would never let any other business have a corner of that business where a person stands in the corner and harasses every Black person who comes through with some kind of BS that comes out of their mouth that's racist, right? Let me allow it on social media. So what if we required them to follow the same host liability that we require people who allow parties to come in, right? We need a cyberstalking statute. The intimidation statute doesn't have enough teeth. I will say we even changed the state law. We found out that our police were locking up Black women in particular for the crime of calling 911 when they were afraid of our police, and they would retaliate on them, take them to jail. give them felonies that would ruin their lives. And a lot of our, not a lot, but several of our Black students came here for school with clean records and straight A's and left here with felony records for the crime of riding in a vehicle pulled over by our cops. And over 75% of our stops are for Black folks in Macomb. That's a disgrace that they're trying to hide. We need that stat to get out there. Now, I'll also tell you, there are orgs that claim that they work on these things in this community, but they've been co-intel-pro'd, meaning our city and WIU leadership have put their people in leadership of those, and those people say, well, everything's just fine. We're going to do this book club. And that's not to say they have to take on this stuff, but they claim they care about it, and yet what they do doesn't impact the problems that we're trying to help people with, right? So that's
Anyway, thank you, Heather. I don't mean to cut you off, but it is getting late, and this was awesome. I am so glad you're dealing with the stuff you're dealing with. Wow. Thank you for letting us know. Just a couple announcements before we go. First of all, if any, there are a whole bunch of links in the chat. If anyone who wants to save the chat, go to the chat, go down to see where it says to, and it says everyone and all that stuff. On the right-hand side of there, you'll see 3 dots. Click on those 3 dots and you'll be able to save the chat and all of the and all of the stuff in it. Anyway, the couple announcements we have is next week for the state call, and that's going to be on the 12th. It's going to be and actually usually Rose makes this announcement, but I'll just do these real fast. Sorry, Rose. It's going to be
it's so long. Thank you for that, though.
it's from 7:30 to 9. It's gonna be run by the Indivisible and our Truth Brigade, and it's going to host Anat Schenker Osorio, and she is going to tell us about messaging and words that win. And then on the 19th, which is a week, is 2 weeks from when, Wednesday, it's going to be hosted by the Vote by Mail Task Force, and is going to be, it's going to have Porter McConnell, who is an activist for the post office, who is trying to get DeJoy out. And also it's going to Mike Quigley, who is the US rep for Illinois 5. He is going to be talking, and it's going to be Save the Post Office. I put both of those links in the chat already. So with all those other links, hopefully you can get to them. And it looks like Rose put some of those links in again. So actually she just did. So anyway, so thank you everybody for coming. And thank you again, Heather. Oh my God, what you deal with. And you are so brave. So, and hopefully you, if you've liked our programs, hopefully you will keep coming. We are, as I mentioned, we are having more.
Yes, please put it down on your calendar. The first Thursday of each month at 7:30 is the rural group. We've had a lot of excitement going on in this group, so we'd love to have you the first Thursday of each month. And we'll see you soon, we hope. Thank you all for staying with us, and a million thanks to Heather and your group for doing such an amazing presentation. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate all of your work everywhere. You give us hope. We know that we're not alone, but we're isolated, so.
Yes. That's the purpose of this group, because many of us do feel isolated. Yeah.
So, and